This is Mr. Stefaniuk's classroom, and this is the Dancing Seagull. Essay fixtures. Ladies and gentlemen, how can I most simply improve my essay? What can I do when writing an essay to simply make it better? There are a few pretty simple tricks that you can follow that you don't have to become even a much better writer or get a better vocabulary or have perfect grammar as long as you just follow these few rules. Number one, so what? You know what? Many of your essay topics are going to be obvious, very simple. There you go, Took. Okay, Took went outside. So many of your questions, many of your essay topics are going to be quite simple. The difference between a good response and a not so good response is frankly shown in the analysis of that question. Getting the correct answer is easy. Explaining the correct answer is a little bit more difficult. Talk about your thought process, use sufficient examples, and really develop your idea in full. When you are writing an essay, please use third person. You are not part of the essay. Sometimes, yes, if it is an opinion, your personal opinion, sure, but be very careful. Don't say we. Who is we? In your essay, when you say we, who are you talking about? Are we the consumers? Are we the readers? Are we the general public? Be precise. If you choose to use the precise language, you really don't often have to use we or I. One trick that you can use, instead of using I, use one. One would think. There are much better ways to work around it, but sometimes you get stuck. And putting one would think in your paper is much better than I think. Sources. Include sources in your paper, obviously. How do you cite those sources? This is what I like to do. According to, let's see, who? It is a study undertaken by the University of Saskatchewan. That's who sponsored the study, and who actually carried out the research. Well, that is this Stenson guy. And this Stenson guy here is going to be in your works cited at the end of the paper, so I will know who has sponsored his work and then what the name of the actual researcher is over here. You do not necessarily need this part, although it's nice to have, but you certainly do need who actually undertook the study, who actually researched the issue. If you do not have this information at all, then source accordingly. Numbers. Number rule. When do you write out the number in full, and when do you use the digits? Here it is. Simple MLA answer. This is not my rule. This is the MLA 8th edition. This is what they say, and I like it. Write out numbers that can be written with 1 or 2 words, unless it is a measurement. Simple. You write out words that can be written with 1 or 2 words, unless it is a measurement. Underneath here we have an example. 62 different species of birds can be found within 12 kilometers of Bodwell High School. 106 species of flowers. So we have 62 in 2 words, 12 kilometers is a measurement, and 106 is 4 words for this number here, so we write it out in actual digits. Formatting. Make your paper look like the example. I will always give you an example of what your paper should look like. If I don't, please ask me, or please ask any teacher. Mr. So-and-so, how would you like our paper to look? Then the teacher will show you an example of exactly what they're looking for. Simple enough. Proforms. Now, proforms are that's one of the things that I really hate the most in papers. Imprecise words and phrases used to replace more complex concepts. Imprecise words and phrases used to replace more complex concepts. Be precise when you are writing. Please be precise. Frankly, you might think it's obvious, and you know what? I might even think it's obvious, but the style isn't as good. If you use as few proforms as possible, your writing will simply improve. It's just that simple. Here are a few of the most common proforms that students use: it, this, that, those, these, instead of writing out the actual concept itself. I have a couple of examples down below. Here is a very common issue that students make. As mentioned earlier, they talk about something from earlier in their paper. You know what? Just say it again. Really, just say it again. Restate that statement, paraphrase yourself, whatever, but don't say as mentioned earlier. That's really weak. The issue. Now, this sounds like it should be okay, but it really isn't. Oftentimes, students have not been clear 100% about what the issue is. Restate that issue. Paraphrase it. What is the concept that you are talking about? It is much better style to actually use the precise language. This means, here is a beautiful example of this from up here. This means that, blah, 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 and that's weak, very weak writing. Okay, don't be afraid to repeat important concepts. They work as a transition. If you repeat that concept again from one sentence to the next, it's actually good. It's good form. Use your fluency, use your common sense on this. Obviously, you're not going to restate the person's name again and again and again and again. Use personal pronouns when they are appropriate, but when they are completely clear. Please make them completely clear. Plurals: our lives and their lives, not our life and their life. Just be correct. Write literally. Sometimes students will use symbols and metaphors. Frankly, don't use symbols and metaphors in academic writing. If you are writing a poem or a short story, most certainly, please, symbols and metaphors are wonderful. Not in an academic paper, however. Some people assert, okay, some people who, I don't know. Some people assert that cheerleading is a sport and should not be axed. Well, axed is... we all know exactly what she's trying to say here, but it's weak language. If you chose more precise language, should not be eliminated, should not be something like that. I don't know. A second example. But outside of China, coronavirus is jumping into the whole world and making the situation worse. No, coronavirus doesn't jump. Coronavirus is most often spit out of someone's mouth. So it's not the virus itself that's jumping. It is being flung out of your face hole. Coronavirus doesn't jump. Write literally, write precisely. It is much better. Proforms, again. See, I hate it so much I even wrote it a second time. In the year 2017, the Chinese government finally realized the level of threat of the air pollution to its citizens' health. They have ordered to shut down 80,000 factories that I just blah, 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 blah. Now, what's the problem with that, Mr. Stefaniuk? Well, I know, I'm being picky, but hey, guess what? I grade your papers, right? The Chinese government finally realized the level of threat. So we have the Chinese government here, and we have pollution to its citizens' health, to its citizens. So who is they? You might say, well, it's obvious it's the Chinese government. But I would say, well, yeah, it's obvious the Chinese government, but we have another noun that is closer to the pronoun than the antecedent pronoun up here. So I don't like it. They. Rewrite that. You could rework that entire sentence to have it much more precise. Just because the advanced countries are doing so well does not mean that we can, that's a poor use there, that we can overlook all of the smaller countries who are affected by their supposed successes. This is a confusing sentence. We, are you meaning we are advanced countries? I think that's what you mean, but you are not a country. As large and as wonderful as you are not a country. Be careful with that. And there. Do you mean the advanced country success or the smaller countries? Be careful with your pronouns. As the saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and like everything else, it has two sides. The saying has two sides, or the road has two sides. It could work both ways. This one, I'm not being silly, I'm not being coy. I seriously don't know what you're talking about. Is it the road has two sides, or the saying has two sides? Like everything else, it's very confusing. Incomplete thesis. Okay, when you are creating a thesis, please, your thesis must be able to get cut out from your paper, stuck up on the wall, and the reader should be able to make complete sense of it. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of thesis. Government should not make plans and teams for people. Government should not make plans and teams for people and make sure everyone is following the terms. I frankly don't know what that means. Make teams for people? Terms for people? Maybe there's a typo, but at any rate, this thesis is incomplete because I cannot stick it up on the wall and have it make sense. I don't know what that means. However, in the past few years, the country has been efficiently working on developing the framework to tackle corruption. Yes, I'm being picky. I'm sure we know which country we are talking about, but put the name of the country in there. What country are we talking about? This is your thesis. This is arguably the most important part of your paper, and you didn't tell me which country we're talking about here. Do not include questions as part of your essay. Just don't include a question in your essay. It's not good form. It makes you look like you're in middle school. It really does. Why has coronavirus we have some spelling, we have some grammar issues here as well. Don't worry about it. Why has coronavirus disappeared in China without damaging China too much? Don't worry about the question itself. It's the fact that it's a question. You don't need it. Just move on to explaining your answer, and you don't need that question at all. Basically, what you're doing when you include a question in an essay is wasting my time. You are wasting my time because I have to read this question, this rhetorical question that you are going to answer anyway, so you're wasting my time. When you waste my time, you get a lower grade. Human versus people. When do you say humans and when do you say people? Students don't know sometimes. Humans is when you're talking about like scientific studies. When you're using humans in a science sense. People is when you're just talking about people with opinions, people walking down the street. People make decisions, humans are studied. How's that work for you? Formatting titles. Just look at the example. Font size 12, keep it standard, just keep it standard. Just make it look like the rest. Frankly, I don't even like titles as part of a smaller paper. A larger paper for sure. A paper that has like 3 or more pages, sure, put a title on there. But shorter than that, you don't need one. But here's your dancing seagull. Woo-hoo!